So Fire Force coming in after that brilliant cliffhanger of last week, which was just brutal, unexpected, and I couldn't wait to see how this episode was going to function. And in my episode 8 review, I did mention that I didn't think he was going to die from this impact. I mean, these are characters who continuously get hit by flaming punches and just a lot of impact that normally would kill a person. Realistically, that impact would normally kill a person, but this is Fire Force. We have like super soldier-esque people. It wouldn't be crazy to think that he would survive this, and because he survived this, we got a pretty intense action episode overall. And to actually see that this episode ended on what I was hoping for, his death. And it wasn't just because he was a bad person, I just really felt like after seeing that, what could you do? Lock him up? I mean, really, these are fire soldiers. Wouldn't they get out of this if they really tried? I mean, this guy can literally create magma if he wanted to. And the fact that there actually was a death, and hell, there was even a soldier who lost their arm, it really does show you that this show will have consequences. And should they mess up, if they don't predict an attack, they could easily lose a leg, lose an arm, lose their head if they're not careful, and people can die. And I really think that was the proper route to go with this series. I mean, this episode, just, the action was incredible. I actually love seeing how our man Shinra went up against this, because this is a powerful opponent. Not only is he just delusional, the man is basically in a cult. They want to turn the Earth into a star. They just want to burn things. They want the Earth to become a star. If that isn't a kind of wake-up call for anyone considering cult, this kind of shows you a great representation on why they're absolutely insane. You should stay as far away as possible from them. But just to see the power level, because even though this is a man who may not be that experienced in the realm of firefighting in their world, he still has an ability that he's had for quite some time. And to actually see just the martial arts, and just the way they would go up against each other, because their abilities are quite different. One, his flames come from his feet, the other is coming from his fist, but the idea of just how they would do almost like UFC-like moves, and the way they would wrap around and spin and just throw each other, and just, it really felt like almost martial arts, but with fire added to it, and it really made it for a pretty intense sequence overall, especially because it lasted a long time. Usually with like battle shonens, when a battle lasts a long time, it can usually be a negative. In fact, most of the time it's a negative. It's like, okay, they just keep powering up, they keep hitting each other, but there's no consequences. But I actually appreciate the fact that on Shinra's side, he's been using his power for a while. The fact that he flew there and then immediately just like gave it his all to attack him, and then immediately continue to fight. Oxygen is the source of flames in terms of if they can continue on, and he used most of it by the time he finished his battle. But then of course on the opponent's side, we have someone who is just getting wounded and using a lot of flames. Hell, he was willing to almost burn himself alive to engulf the entire building. It really felt as if with every punch, even though realistically if you were to do that same punch to a normal human, it would kill them. But for these soldiers who were basically super soldiers, it did still feel like they were getting wounded. Either they were getting impaled, that would have to hurt, they're gonna have a few migraines after that battle if they were to survive. It actually did feel like there was impact and consequences, and you could tell the characters were losing their breath. They were losing their composure because this was an intense sequence, not only for someone like Shinra who had to make sure children weren't in danger, Tamaki wasn't in danger, he also had to make sure himself that he kind of paced himself so he could continue to protect as he basically deflected these attacks but also gave it his all. So by the time basically Shinra's done fighting, you actually did feel like there was a lot of consequence throughout this fight, that it actually took a toll on both characters, and even though he was starting to get back up, you felt as if Shinra had to fight again, he probably would lose, because he really was out of juice at that point. So to see the ice come in and kind of stop everything, that was a sigh of relief. It didn't feel like the battle ended in an anticlimactic way. Like if we were to start this episode off and he would have just said died from that, it would have been pretty brutal, and it would have really showed us that, man, people could easily die in this. But I think if we did that, I think having other fights in the future that would have lasted a lot longer would make us go back to this point and say, well, we had a character who died from having his head impaled to the ground, but why didn't this character now who's got his head impaled to a wall? So I think the idea that they showed us 100%, characters like these who have these abilities, yes, they can survive longer than your average human, but they can still die, and they can easily get wounded, and they can easily lose their breath if they use their abilities too much. So I think they actually did a great job at showing us there is consequences, and that cliffhanger wasn't just for show. It did have severe consequences and made us feel like this show can do some pretty bold things if it really wants to. Hell, I mean, in terms of the story, they were willing to burn children alive. The story already was doing bold things, but in terms of the combat, I am glad that a big portion to this show is incredible animation and fighting, so to actually have it feel like they are doing the right thing in this department, it just gives me a sigh of relief, really making me feel like, thank God. But I think just seeing that ice, it was, this is the point where I thought it was a cool ability, but seeing it in action, you can understand why this is the shield of the division, because a person who seemingly was like turning himself into magma just icicle at the end. Like, it didn't even look like he was breaking a sweat. The combination of his ability and the weapon, it just felt as if, holy shit, it is a good thing that this man wasn't the traitor, that wasn't the bad guy, because I am so happy that he shook hands with Shinra at the end of the episode, because that's who you want on your side. Even if the entire first division turns out to be mostly corrupt, you know at least this man's gonna make a few popsicles, figures out there's some bad apples within his own bunch. And I think overall, this episode, it just, combined with episode 8 and 9, it really does feel like this is the future of Fire Force. Like, I definitely think Tamaki and just the overly fan service design scenes that are attached to her, I do hope they tone that down. I don't know if they will or not. But if I remove that, I just look at Fire Force and what this episode in particular did, and I leave with nothing but just positivity going into the next week's episode. And I really hope that's going to continue to be the direction. I've heard nothing but good things about the future of Fire Force. I heard like last week was a lot of people like really hyping up in the manga community and just really anticipating this when they learned that it was getting an anime adaptation. So I definitely think just seeing the idea of almost like a cult organization wanting to turn the Earth into like a star, it just feels like it's an interesting idea. Hell, we learned that Shinra's brother is one of the children who survived this weird ritual, probably has been brainwashed and also has powers, and you can already tell, like, brother versus brother, that's going to be emotional turmoil. Where could that go? I think they have a really interesting idea of not only just more exploring the division and who's actually corrupt within the Fire Force organization, but also the people outside those walls, the people wanting to turn Earth into a star, and what the true end goal for some of these characters will be. Because for Shinra, he's a part of an organization that for his crew, he trusts in, he believes in. It's definitely getting bigger by the day with Tamaki now joining because she was kind of kicked out for the time being of her own. It feels as if as we learn more of these characters, the more we see with them, the more connections that get formed, the deeper the conspiracy goes, because even though we have these sometimes slice of life scenes where it's cute, it's adorable, it's funny, it's charming, at the end of the day we know that these characters are going to go up against a conspiracy, and the connections they currently form now and in the future are going to play a big factor of, will they get out of this alive? Because they're going to need to put their full trust in one another, and if they have doubts about people within their own crew, their own organization, and they're forced to fight alongside them, it could be a very negative thing. So I really hope that this show just continues on putting a lot of emphasis on the relationships in terms of how they grow and develop, with the pros and the cons, with just the conflict and just the love that they can share with one another, but also how this kind of cult-like idea will be explored, because we're really starting to see more and more characters, more fire powers, the idea of a sniper fire, which is just so cool and I love it. It really does feel like, even though this can be like looked at by some on the surface as just, pretty fire animation, I actually think the idea of where Shinra's character is going, the family, and just what's happened to him, the more he learns, the angrier he might get, and the more just conflicted he might be about what side he should truly fight on. Because if he's going to get held back by his own organization, maybe he should go at it solo and try to take down the people who ruined his life and ruined the lives of many. Or maybe he will just fully trust in his organization, at least the 8th Division, and trust that they will be pure and will be able to go up against it. I just really trust in Fire Force at this point in time. And when I can leave an episode just feeling, okay, I point to Tamaki, I'm like, okay, I'm not really a huge fan of this scene here, but that scene's like 1% of the episode. The other 99%, I was jumping for joy. I was like, this animation's cool. I think they just overall stylized it really pretty. There's emotional weight behind these punches and the dialogue, and they actually gave consequences where not only did the villain die, they also wounded one of the good characters, showing us that it's not just the bad guys who will suffer, it can also be the good guys looking after their friends, and I think that's really well done. Voice acting on point, definitely between friends, and just the delusional words that were being said by a guy so brainwashed that he actually believed the bullshit he was spouting, which you gotta give props to the voice actor. The heartbreak from friends, and even Shinra's rage and just kind of confusion of what's truly going on. I think the actors actually gave an A+ performance over last week and this week to really make it feel like this was supposed to be tense, make us have shivers up our spine, and feel like children could burn here. Not only could children burn here, characters who are innocent could burn here. And it really feels like, even though it has its fun, even though it has its fair share of laughs and just fan service, it is serious when it counts. And as long as it can be serious when it counts, that's the most important thing, especially for a show where characters are supposed to be fearful of their lives, that they could be engulfed by flames at any moment and become a monster that they desperately are afraid of. I definitely thought this was an excellent episode. I thought last week was probably the best episode of Fire Force, and I think this episode is kind of on par with it. I think if you combine episodes 8 and 9, it's just kind of like, if this is what you'd want to show people if you were trying to get them into Fire Force, say like, this is a good representation. You might have some issues with maybe some of the earlier stuff, but this is clearly the direction the show wants to go, and I think most people would be hooked with it. But what did everyone think of this week's episode? Do you love it? Do you hate your favorite moment? Where do you think next week is going to go? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.